And just when we thought that the pandemic was behind us, the Wuhan virus has resurfaced. Cases are rising in India, authorities are gearing up. We don't know what lies ahead, but we should be prepared for whatever it is. The government and all relevant authorities say the situation is well under control. The positivity rate is not alarming yet, but it can shoot up within days. We've learned it the hard way. Is another wave in the making? And is India prepared to deal with it? Here's a report.
3 years since the Wuhan virus leaked out of China, the world is still on the edge. Pandemic's impact on the global economy can still be seen. Countries are in distress, and supply chains are yet to recover. But just when we think some normalcy is returning to our day-to-day lives, the Wuhan virus raises its ugly head again. This time, it's India, which recorded 3,016 new COVID cases on Wednesday. That might not look like a dramatic figure to you. After all, it's nowhere close to the number of cases India recorded at the height of the pandemic. But this is the highest infection count in the country in the last 6 months. And it's a jump of 40% from Tuesday. The positivity rate on Tuesday stood at 2.7%. Again, not alarming, because a positivity rate under 5% generally means the situation is under control. But we cannot get complacent. Just in January, the pandemic was thought to be over. On 17th of January, India recorded 89 new cases, the lowest since March 2020. The latest rise in Wuhan virus cases coincides with a sharp uptick in cases of seasonal influenza. In either case, it's time for you to put the mask back on. The Indian government is watching the Wuhan virus graph very closely. Last week, Prime Minister Modi held a high-level meeting to review the country's preparedness to deal with another wave. The highlight was this remark: "The pandemic is far from over." That's what the Prime Minister said. So the mood in New Delhi is clear. There can be no laxity. Both the government and the public need to be vigilant, and the government is doing its part. The Health Ministry has written to 6 states that are contributing to the spike in COVID cases. Next month, India will hold mock drills to take stock of preparedness of our hospitals. Public and private health facilities in all districts will participate. Today, India is far better prepared to deal with a surge in Wuhan virus cases than it was 2 years ago. More than 90% of India's population is fully vaccinated. The recovery rate in this country stands at almost 99%. So don't press the panic button just yet. Countries like Russia, Japan, Canada and the UK are also seeing a rise in COVID cases. Most of the world has learned how to live with the Wuhan virus. There is no magic wand to make it disappear. So we must remember the lessons we have learned to avoid the havoc the virus created a couple of years ago. Mask up and don't let your guard down.
Our last story tonight is about a gigantic mass murderer, one whose secret weapon is gravity. And it's the biggest our cosmos has ever seen. We're talking about a black hole. It's ultra-massive. And this is not an adjective scientists throw around loosely. Actually, nobody does, because it's not even a real word. Ultra-massive. This black hole has probably earned it. It's about 30 billion times the mass of Sun, 30 billion. Ultra-massive black holes, like this one, are rare and elusive. Where did they come from? Are they hungry beasts? To put it nicely, if you fell into one of them, you would surely die, but it's not clear how. They are an enigma, and it's ironic how everything we know about how the universe works literally depends on them. Here's a report.
Welcome, Earthlings. We're about to tell you about a dark place. It's okay to get lost here, because this is a place of no return. We're talking about a black hole. And scientists in the UK have found the biggest one yet. Want to understand the gravity of the situation? Pardon the pun. This black hole is about 30 billion times the mass of the Sun. But let's start with the basics. What is a black hole? It's a region in space with an immensely strong gravitational pull. Think of it as a Dementor, you know, the fictional character from Harry Potter? The way a Dementor sucks in all of your joy, a black hole swallows everything. And we mean everything. Anything that's too close or too slow or too small to fight the gravitational force. And it's so huge, it can swallow entire planets and stars. It can rip them apart. Not even light can escape it. And nothing is faster than light. So you can imagine, with every bit of mass, a black hole grows. At this point, you may be wondering, how would you die in a black hole? Will the gravity rip you apart? Will it crush you? Or will you be flushed into oblivion? Sadly, no one knows. It's one of the greatest debates in physics. The black hole that has now been discovered is being hailed as an ultra-massive one. What are these ultra-massive black holes? As the name suggests, they're the most massive objects in the universe, with between 10 to 40 billion times the mass of the Sun. It's believed that they can be found at the center of all large galaxies, like the Milky Way. No one's sure how they were formed. Some believe it came from a merger between massive galaxies. This would have happened billions of years ago. And these ultramassive black holes are extremely rare, making this discovery very exciting. It opens up doors to find more such black holes, especially those beyond our local universe. And astronomers may be able to discover far more inactive black holes, because most black holes are in an active state, and you don't want any matter to go anywhere near those. Let's just say there's a lot of heating up and radiation. Black holes are obviously scary, they're dangerous, and we don't know enough about them. But fear not, scientists say our planet will not be pulled to its doom. So hopefully a black hole won't eat us up, because they're light eaters.
You can't manage what you don't measure. This is a famous quote. It's also true for the gender pay gap, which, just to put it out there, is not a myth. It's the reality of our time, something that almost half the world has to put up with. What is the gender pay gap? It's the percentage difference between the salaries of men and women. Globally, women are paid about 20% less than men. And in 95% of all occupations, men earn more than women. Now, Australia wants to tackle this problem. Australia has become the latest country to make companies reveal their gender wage gaps. Australia has passed new equality legislation. It will apply to all companies that have more than 100 employees. All such companies will have to report the differences between what men and women earn. And this was long overdue, we say. Women in Australia earn about 23% less than men. To make better sense of this, let's think of it in terms of money. A woman in Australia is paid at least $1 million less than a man throughout her working life. $1 million less. How does this look on the global stage? Australia ranks 43rd on the Global Gender Pay Gap Index. The index is topped by Iceland, Finland, Norway, New Zealand, and Sweden. They have the least pay gap. And the worst performers are Afghanistan, Pakistan, Congo, Iran, and Chad. What about India? India ranks 135th on a list of 146 countries. It doesn't look good, and that's an understatement. India has a lot of work to do in this direction. Perhaps learn from Australia. Pay gap transparency is a very good move. Study after study has shown that transparency helps reduce pay gap. Look at the results of one survey. Making salaries transparent showed a reduction in wage gap by 50%. And this is good for employers too. When wages are more transparent, employees tend to work harder. That's what studies say. There is little debate among experts over the benefits of this. A growing number of countries agree. A lot of them are pushing for wage transparency. Australia has joined the list of countries like the UK, Japan, the European Union, and parts of the US. governments are trying to improve transparency to accelerate pay parity. Take Denmark, for example. Their legislation requires firms to show their gender statistics. And since it passed, there's been a 7% reduction in gender pay gap. So reporting the pay gap is certainly vital. It's a very important first step, but it's not the end of the story. This is not a silver bullet that will automatically lead us to the finish line. Let's go back to Denmark. It saw improvements, but it came at the cost of a slow wage growth for men, and there was no real change in the wage growth of women. Now look at the US. They're forcing companies into wage transparency. Their gender pay gap has not gotten worse, but it hasn't improved either. It's been stuck for the past 2 decades. Women still earn 82% of what men do in America. You see, reporting the problem is easy, it's just data. What's difficult is changing mindsets. Companies have to acknowledge the gap and reshape attitudes. And they must do it urgently, because at the current pace, it will take more than 100 years to eliminate the pay gap globally. 100 years, which is unacceptable, because women have done their part. They've ticked all the right boxes. They're more educated now. They've increased participation in the workforce. They take on more senior roles. So now it's up to governments and firms to do their part. The ball is in their court. In order to break the glass ceiling, women need to first get off the sticky floor. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Thailand. A wildfire engulfed an entire mountain in a national park. This happened just 2 hours away from Bangkok. Initially, it was difficult for firefighters to access the location, but now efforts are on to put out the blaze. In the US, there seems to be no respite for people in the flood-hit state of California. Roads and agricultural land are entirely submerged. Meanwhile, Israel has launched a new version of its spy satellite. The aim is to enhance round-the-clock regional monitoring. In India, a cheetah from Namibia gave birth to 4 cubs. This has happened for the first time in 7 decades. Cheetahs had been extinct in India for 70 years. Indian Prime Minister Modi called it wonderful news. And finally, what happened today in history? There was an attempt to assassinate former US President Ronald Reagan. The year was 1981. Reagan was newly elected. He just delivered a speech at a hotel in Washington and was ready to leave in his limousine when a bullet hit him in the chest. It fractured his ribs and caused internal bleeding. The shooter, John Hinckley, told the investigators that he tried to assassinate Reagan to impress a famous actress. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.